Riots display human beings acting at their worst, usually the result of political or social turmoil. Most riots rely on killing, raping, looting, and widespread destruction to get their point across. Hello everyone and welcome back to Toporo. In today's video, let's count down together the top 10 biggest riots in world history. Please stay tuned because these stories will surely shock and appall you. 10. New York Draft Riots, July 13, 1863. In 1863, U.S. citizens were drafted to serve on the Union side in the Civil War. However, a loophole existed, and anybody with $300 could pay a commutation fee and avoid conscription. In today's dollars, that fee would be equal to over $5,000, a sum of money far out of reach of poor and working-class people. Resentment at the situation eventually resulted in rioting, but those taking part soon targeted African Americans, and large numbers were lynched in the streets and had their homes destroyed. President Lincoln sent militia regiments to pacify the city, and by the fourth day, the uprising was crushed decisively. But to this day, no one can agree on the number of people killed in the rioting or in the military action that suppressed it. Figures vary between 120 and 2,000 people killed, and damage was estimated at between $1 million and $5 million, a huge sum of money for the time. 9. Tulsa, May 31, 1921. In 1921, America witnessed the worst example of racial violence in history, when a white female elevator operator claimed that a black man has sexually assaulted her in the elevator. Violence broke out. The man fled the scene and a manhunt began for his capture. This precipitated a riot that claimed the lives of hundreds of people. The rioting got so bad that the opposing sides of blacks and whites, many of whom were World War I veterans, began forming battle lines and digging trenches, waging a makeshift war against each other. Overall, 35 city blocks were destroyed by fire, leaving 10,000 homeless and causing estimates of $1.8 million in damage. This would amount to $21 million in today's money. 8. Watts Riot, 1965. Injured, thousands. Dead, 34. Damages, $40 million. The 1965 riots in the Los Angeles neighborhood of Watts were the worst in the city's history at the time. Watts was a predominantly low-income community with a large African-American population, many of whom felt that in addition to high unemployment, poverty, and racial discrimination, its residents were regularly on the receiving end of police brutality. These sentiments fueled a bitterness and resentment that wouldn't need much prodding to turn violent. Tensions flared in August of that year when 21-year-old Marquette Fry was pulled over by a highway patrolman, Lee W. Minicus, for drunk driving. While Marquette was talking to police, his brother, a passenger in the car, ran home to get their mother, Rena Price. Rena returned to the spot where Marquette was stopped and scolded her son for being reckless. However, the situation got out of hand quickly. Someone shoved Rena and Marquette was struck. Rena then jumped an officer, while another officer pulled out a shotgun. The family was put under arrest. A crowd of residents grew and started to throw objects at the arresting officers. After the family had been taken into custody, crowds continued to swell, and the police were unable to stop the unrest. Over the next 6 days, the rebellion intensified, with 31,000 to 35,000 adults participating. The National Guard put in a curfew zone encompassing over 45 miles of south-central Los Angeles in an attempt to restore public order. 34 people died during the riots, and thousands more were injured. The unrest would stand as the worst such case in Los Angeles history until the 1992 riots 27 years later. 7. Hong Kong Riot, May 1967. After pro-communist demonstrations against the British rule took place in Hong Kong in 1967, the ensuing riots set off a wave of bombs and violent skirmishes that included a 7-year-old girl and her 2-year-old brother killed by a bomb wrapped like a birthday present. While the leftists called the original actions by the government as fascist atrocities, their own tactics, such as killing reporters of dissenting opinions, did nothing but create chaos and belittle their initial calls for free speech. In the aftermath of the riots, 51 people lay dead, 5,000 were arrested, and millions of dollars of damage had been caused. 6. Detroit, July 23, 1967. As Saturday night passed into Sunday morning in Detroit on July 23rd, all the bars closed their doors and windows, except for Blind Pigs, those unlicensed after-hours operations. A few police units rolled up onto 12th Street, one of the harder areas of town, expecting to bust up the bar and a few patrons. Instead, they found almost 100 people holding a homecoming party for 2 Vietnam veterans. Understaffed, they decided to call for backup and book them all anyway. Drunk, confused, and upset, those who weren't immediately arrested began protesting, and as police numbers dithered, a few began smashing clothing store windows. It was at this moment that things spiraled out of control. It's hard to understand how the angry mob mentality, the collective hue of red vision, spread so ferociously. The pastor of a nearby church reported seeing a gleefulness in throwing stuff and getting stuff out of buildings. And rioters wouldn't even listen to a Detroit Tigers player calling for calm on top of a demolished car in the middle of the street. In less than 48 hours, the National Guard came to assist, along with military troops and more police, but it would take 5 full days to put out the force of the riot, arresting over 7,000 people. Property damage was estimated to be between $40 million to $80 million. 5. Chicago, April 5, 1968. At 6:01 p.m. on April 4, 1968, the civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King was murdered in his hotel room in Memphis. Throughout the United States, Black Americans took to the streets in protest and anger, bringing riots to Baltimore, D.C., and Chicago, which experienced the worst of the 3 cities. By the following afternoon, more than 30 blocks had become consumed by the riot, transformed into a burning sprawl. In the weeks that followed, Chicago experienced one of the worst food shortages in recent history. 4. Los Angeles, April 29, 1992. In 1991, 4 Los Angeles police officers had brutally beaten Rodney King, an African-American motorist, after a high-speed pursuit. The incident was caught on videotape, and the footage was aired repeatedly on television news for an entire year. The use of force seemed so excessive that many people believed the officers could never walk away from a trial as free men. However, on April 29, 1992, all 4 officers were acquitted. Thousands responded to the verdict by engaging in widespread arson, assault, and looting, killing 53 people and injuring thousands more. The unrest went on for 6 days and did not die down until the National Guard was deployed to the area. When it was all over, more than 1,000 buildings had been destroyed by fire, and most assessments of the damage put its cost at almost $1 billion, making it the costliest episode by far of civil unrest in United States history. 3. Bombay, December 1992. In December of 1992, some of the worst riots of all time occurred in the city of Bombay, India. The Babri Mosque was destroyed when a political rally turned into a destructive mob 150,000 strong. But this wasn't just any mosque. It was the largest mosque in Uttar Pradesh, a state of more than 31 million Muslims. Before the damage, the Indian Supreme Court had promised and assured the people that the mosque wouldn't be harmed. Clearly, things were not going according to plan. What followed was a back-and-forth war of riots and killings between Hindus and Muslims, leaving nearly 1,000 dead in Bombay alone over the course of less than a month. It would also lead to a massive bomb blast in March of 1993, where over 250 were killed and more than 700 injured. 2. Gujarat, February 27, 2002. In 2002, a train full of 58 Hindus returning from a pilgrimage was set on fire by a Muslim mob. This led to retaliatory attacks against worshippers of Islam throughout the Gujarat region, causing widespread devastation and loss of life, with almost 1,100 people killed in the violence. Most tragically, over 600 children were orphaned when all was said and done. These figures don't take into account the 223 people reported missing and assumed dead. Number 1. Kenya, 2007. It's difficult to imagine. Everyone in your country is carefully watching the presidential election results. It's gonna be a close one, but at the same time, everyone has a feeling that it's rigged. The election of Mwai Kibaki in Kenya was seen by much of the population of the country as a corrupt attempt to remain in power. Fearing that peaceful protests would do little to solve the situation, many residents began to use violence in an attempt to force the politicians to listen to their concern, and some of the most violent rioting in history ensued. From Nairobi to the coast, hundreds were killed and buildings were burned by machete-wielding rioters. Club-carrying police officers tried to restore order by firing tear gas and live bullets into the immense crowds. Crowds moved across villages, torching buildings, raping women, and killing. Hundreds fled in fear from this violent demonstration of human beings at their worst. Around 800 people were killed over several days before order could be restored, while hundreds of thousands were forced to flee their homes. Those are the list of the worst riots in human history. As you may see, while many major protests don't always achieve their aims, they had left a mark on society, often inspiring other demonstrations around the globe and across the decades. So how do you feel about this list? Feel free to share your thoughts with us in the comments section, as we always welcome all your ideas. And please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so that you will not miss any of our interesting episodes next time. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.